Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce you to my guest today, Corey Blake. Corey is the publisher of Conscious Capitalism Press and the founder and CEO of Round Table Companies, a storytelling company. Prior to starting Round Table Companies in 2005, Corey was a professional actor in Los Angeles, acting in one of the 50 greatest Super Bowl commercials of all time, and guest starring on numerous popular television shows, including Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Shield, and Joan of Arcadia. He is an avid supporter and sponsor of Conscious Capitalism, who has appeared on their main stage at the last 7 national events. His work with books and graphic novels has yielded 15 independent publishing awards and mentions features in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Inc., Forbes, and Wired. Corey is also the creator of the Vulnerability Wall and the Vulnerability is Sexy card game. His documentary of the same name won 2017 Addy and Hermes Awards for branded content. Please join me in welcoming Corey Blake. Hey, Corey.
So much, Tammy. Wonderful to be with you.
Clearly, your career has taken a variety of twists and turns, and you've gone through many pathways, all of them having, a creative pathway. But one thing that we talked about in our pre-interview, and I think my listeners by now know that I do pre-interviews, is you did say that as you started as an actor, while it was fun, it wasn't as meaningful to you, and that you needed to do something that allowed you to open people up emotionally even more. Am I getting that right?
You are. There was that challenging dichotomy of what does success look like on the outside and what does it feel like on the inside.
Yeah.
And being hired by companies like Mountain Dew and Pepsi and Miller Beer and Wrigley's Gum. These are household recognized brands. And they used my talent to emotionally open people up so that they could move in with their call to action, buy our product. And sometimes I was in alignment and felt like that was beneficial for the world. And many times it wasn't. And I got paid very well. And everyone around me was like, you're doing what we all are out here to do, right? So I'm getting cheered on, certainly cheered on by my mother, who was very excited. Right? And eventually just having to come to terms with the reality that I'm not feeling fulfilled by this work. I'm starting to be angry that I'm having to go on these auditions and frustrated. And one day I remember driving, I had this really fun older Mustang convertible, and I'm driving to an audition just in my head complaining, and had that moment of realization of some young kid would love to have these opportunities that I get, and I should probably just let someone else take them on.
How had you evolved in the acting career to that extent? Because some people spend a long time to reach that point, to get those high profile commercials or to be on primetime TV as you were.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
Clearly you had a real successful career in acting, and you made a very clear choice to step away from it. I'm curious how old you were and what the transition was like once you decided that you needed to move on.
So I have a degree in theater. So I spent 4 years learning acting from the stage. And then a year after graduating, I was out in Los Angeles, and I spent the first 3 years doing what most people do out in LA, finding other jobs to make a living, surviving, making friends, and using whatever available income I could to inspire my career more. better headshots, acting classes, going to the showcases, all that stuff. And in 1999, I got my first break, so to speak. I actually wrote the casting director who was working on Fight Club. And I didn't know what Fight Club was going to be at the time, of course, but saw that they were casting. And I wrote a very heartfelt letter and said, I need someone to throw me a bone so I can get in the union, so I have more opportunity. And this casting director was that person for me. So she brought me in, and I got to work 8 days on Fight Club as a background union actor. And I got to watch David Fincher direct, and I got to stand behind the monitors for 8 days. Most extras go off in their own area and play cards or, just chit chat or whatever. And I was all about soaking in whatever I could. And that experience then kind of led to me being SAG eligible for the union. And then on the same day, I booked a Mountain Dew commercial and a very small appearance on Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And that Mountain Dew.
It was all in the same day.
Those two opportunities came to me on the same day: a TV show appearance and a commercial appearance. And the Mountain Dew commercial went on to become a Super Bowl spot.
Right.
But it was a huge spot. It was the Bohemian Rhapsody mock-up that was directed by Sam Bayer, who had directed Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit. It was shot on the 20th Century Fox lot. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And from there on, I was fortunate to get cast in a whole bunch of commercials. So at this point, I'm in my early 20s and approaching probably 25. And then I start producing and directing because I needed some fulfillment. And when I'm getting hired by these other jobs, I'm a tool for other people. I'm a crayon in their crayon box. I show up. And there was never a feeling of belonging for me, because you show up for anywhere from 1 to 5 days, essentially coming into someone else's family. You're a guest.
Right.
They've been together their whole lives, or they've been together for, a month or a year, whatever. And I'm coming in for a few days and then I'm leaving. And so there was this lack of feeling of belonging. And so I started producing projects because I wanted to create, I think, more belonging. It was a very subconscious move. But I brought together a bunch of actors and paid for us to go to Mammoth in California for a week and learn storytelling. And we came out from there and had a film that we wanted to shoot together. We raised some money. We attracted a really incredible crew of people, because in LA, people work about half the time, and the rest of the time they're looking for really great opportunities.
Yeah.
And so we attracted a first-rate crew, shot our first film, led to a second film, a third film, a fourth film. And I'm learning leadership, essentially.
Yeah, right.
I'm learning how to inspire people to exceed their own expectations.
Right,
absolutely. Our departments, right? So there's a lot of moving parts. So then I'm approaching my late 20s by the time I realize that ultimately acting is not fulfilling me, and I need to shift out of it. And then I'm getting married at that point and end up coming back to Chicago and go through a really rocky 3-year transition of, if I'm not an actor, I don't have any idea what I am. And yet I started this company, and it was starting to take off pragmatically, not from a creative standpoint, for the first 6 months or so. And then it started to click in, and I found a new sense of purpose.
So when you say you started this company, what did it start as?
So RTC started in LA.
So that was RTC?
That was RTC in 2005.
Oh, okay.
But at that point, it was a writing company. I was going on Craigslist. Craigslist was the thing at the time to find writing work. And I was realizing there are all these business people who need writers, and all these writers who are looking for jobs, and they don't seem to understand how to communicate with one another. And that felt relatively comfortable to me. And so rather than being just an agent and bringing them together, I would actually remain part of the process and help both of them get more than they wanted out of the experience. And I would take a portion of the income for that. And it was a growing business where I could replace myself. I was generating enough income that I could start to bring other people in. And then thankfully, because of my LA background, started attracting some world-class coaches and CEOs who wanted to tell the hero's journey of their own experience, or the experience they were having guiding other people. And then I got addicted to books.
So I want to back up just a little.
Please.
It sounded like you were acting, and then fairly early on, the bug didn't bite you deeply enough, basically.
The acting bug had a firm hold on me. I was taking a class that I loved participating in. We worked 20 hours a week like outside of class to be good in class.
Yeah.
Jeff Goldblum, like little name drop, not for any other reason than to say one of my favorite teachers I've ever had. He was incredible, and I was learning a specific technique that I still use in the business work that I do today.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. So
it was presence work. It was really deep, profound presence work. How do two people ride the crest of the wave that's available right here in this moment together?
Yeah.
So I was addicted to that, but the industry and the work.
Okay.
You go up on set and you might act for 5 minutes a day.
Right.
The rest of the time is sitting around waiting, rehearsing a little bit, but it's very different than what theater work was.
Right. And I've heard a lot of people talk about that. There's
Sure.
a huge difference between those film actors who talk about their work in the live theater versus what they do in film, and how we've seen a lot of them going back and forth between Broadway and film.
Yeah. And I'd say for some reason, I recognize in looking back, had I stuck it out, I likely would have gotten larger and larger roles that would have been more satisfying. And yet I still don't know if they would have been in alignment, because in LA, you have to get to a certain level to start turning work down.
Yes.
Right? It's out of alignment. And so I think that was a piece of my need to veer off, was to have more of a sense of control, because I was feeling purposeless.
Right. What you had done, though, is you had started developing your own projects, you really kind of took control, you took leadership, you put some teams together and produced your own work. And then you got married and moved to Chicago. And I know I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version here, but I was wondering, why didn't you, for example, start your own production company and stay in the industry?
So I did twice. So there were two storytelling companies before RTC.
Okay.
Both of them in the film arena. And I would say in both of those companies, the way that I've kind of looked back on that time was that there was a lot that I did right. I was really good at doing a bunch of things right. And in each of those situations, I was the reason that those companies blew up. Eventually, from the inside out, they exploded.
Say more about that.
In both of those situations, it was poor romantic decisions on my part that eroded trust that I had spent so much time building. And I for some reason, I thought from a young age, I've always been a list builder in my life. I have a gift I know how to find what's special about people.
Yeah.
The time of my life when I would use that in somewhat of a manipulative fashion, believing that if I did all these things that made people feel special, when I did something that was not as on the up and up, that I had created a scale that was in my favor. And I thought that I could essentially do no wrong to some degree. And in each of those situations, I did something wrong enough that things blew up. And then I had to deal with the recovery of the pain of what was lost. Lessons that were so vital for me to be able to create RTC and learn how to do it in a healthier way.
Yeah. And so when did you decide to did you leave the film industry altogether, or are you still making films?
I've come back to it from the documentary side now, but I left for a considerable amount of time, and that was circumstantial. I was getting married at the time. My wife was I know you have a background in psychology. My wife's a psychologist. She had spent a long time building her career out here in the Chicago area. We had gone to high school together and then lost track of each other for 10 years. She saw my Mountain Dew commercial on TV and got back in touch with me. And and we end up together. And at the time we're getting married, she thought she was going to move out to LA. And from an identity standpoint, it was too challenging for her. And I had more flexibility in terms of where I lived. I didn't necessarily need to be in LA anymore. So I came back. I affectionately refer to that period as my 3-year temper tantrum. It was a very challenging time of trying to figure out who I was, how to make meaning of the work that I was doing. I certainly eventually started finding my way into stuff that meant more, but I was still at the bottom of a new ladder, and that's always tough.
So what do you think were the keys to finding your way through or up that ladder, so to speak, through the temper tantrum?
Some strong personal development work was imperative. So a great therapist for a certain period of that. I was
Mhm.
also learning to be married, right? And that's a
Yeah.
set of challenges.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd say in many ways, I think that period of time was a lot of white knuckling. It was a lot of struggle. It was a lot of working hard, trying hard. Like I said, it was a lot of probably more struggle than was necessary, but it was finding who I was in that space required
Yeah.
me to do a lot of wrestling.
Yeah, and I think that's true though. When anybody is going through a period of self-discovery, not to put it, that sounds so simple, right? But there is a struggle or a process of trying to figure out who you are, right? And who you want to be at that point, because you spent so much time being somebody who, and you had a path, a successful path. So it's very hard, I think, when you've got a lot of external forces telling you how good you are at something. And yet inside you're saying, yeah, but this isn't it. This really isn't it. But I don't know what is it.
It's interesting you bring up the personal development styles. Like I'm a collider. I'm somebody, I know who I am by how I press up against the world and how it pushes back. And we all have our different styles for how I think we approach that kind of self-discovery you're talking about.
Yeah.
Say that 3-year period in LA, there's a lot to press up against, right? So I was able to kind of define myself more easily, I think, there. When I wasn't an actor anymore, it was almost like decision paralysis. I didn't know how to collide with, I didn't have things to collide with regularly. And therefore I didn't know how to define myself.
Yeah.
Wonderful struggle.
Glad it's over, I bet.
Yeah, no, I did not have a really robust toolkit to manage that. So there was a lot more suffering than there needed to be, I'd say.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for a more expanded toolbox.
So here you are now. You've been in Chicago for 13, 14 years? 15?
Yep. 14 years.
And RTC has been
14 years.
14 years.
Mm-hmm.
What did it look like then? What does it look like now?
So it started off as that simple transactional business. I mean, before the CEOs and coaches started coming to me, we were writing books on foot fungus. I love that. I love that joke because it's true. it just cracks me up to say, ebooks on foot fungus and articles on why you should eat dark chocolate. Like, who cares? There's enough of it already.
I don't need a book to tell me to eat dark chocolate.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It was so pointless. But at the beginning, that's how it goes. And then we were entirely book focused for many years. Once I caught the bug, our first 2 books, one was with a world-class coach and one was with a CEO who had come from a background where he never should have, you could say never was on the trajectory to be a successful business person. He was a gang member. He should have been shot in the face at one point over a cocaine deal, like crazy stuff. And he found his way, and became quite successful and wanted to write a book to give back to other Latino kids.
Wow.
And we put that book out and published it in 2008. And the morning that his local paper in Aurora, Illinois put out a story on him at 7 a.m, he got a call from a woman who was crying on the other end of the phone and didn't say anything for a while. And then eventually he said, what can I do for you? What's going on? And she said, where have you been? Where have you been? And he would tell that story and I would get chills. And then we heard, the impact of his book was ginormous. The number of kids who got out of gangs, who went back to school, to the point where gangs would give demerits to kids who were seen with the book in their hand. Like, that's real.
Oh,
right. So I got very addicted to that. We've had about 50,000 kids who've gone through a curriculum around that book, particularly in the Chicago area. How do you not get addicted to that? Like, that's a really positive addiction. So
that's what we call work from the inside out.
It was so rewarding, so moving. And so I really started pursuing that kind of work and determining how do we attract more of those kinds of people where we can have that kind of ripple.
Yeah. So now what is your process or what is your role with an author like that?
So when we're working with an author, and to this day, books are still about 50% of our business.
Is it? Okay.
We've taken our methodology for that and applied it, but it's still a huge part of what we do. There are 2 kinds of books I think that business people put out. One is an info product, here's what I've learned. And one is a more personal who I am story. and how I've come to champion this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. One is more of a Simon Sinek, the heart of why, and one is, at the end of the day, an info product. What I've discovered through my work is that when people create an info product, what they end up doing is attracting more of the same to them, because what you knew today is the thing people now want. So if you love what you're doing right now and just want to scale that, an info book is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
If you are on that journey to what is evolving, right, then it's a different kind of book. If I share with you, instead of what I've learned, I invite you into the moments of my pain, of my failure, of what I'm chasing because it felt so good, all of that stuff. If I can bring you into the room for those moments where the universe taught me really significant lessons, by the end of that experience, you can, as a reader, have that moment of, oh, well, you're born to do this. And who doesn't want to work with someone who's born to do the thing that they're doing? Right. So our process is really about how do we create deep and profound trust so that person has a safe container, using psychology language, a safe container to practice, to try on different costumes, so to speak, to say things out loud that they've never said before, and see how they feel when they come out, how they're reflected back. So what someone says to us in the 3rd month, right, is different than in the 6th month. Mm-hmm. At that point, they start telling us stuff that they often haven't told their spouse. Mm-hmm. The 9th month of our process, they're often saying things out loud they've never said before. Mm-hmm. Our job is to really reflect non-judgment and love through that process,
right?
So that they have an experience of transformation as they start to own and recognize these pieces that they've been avoiding, but have been subconsciously driving their motivations, their behaviors, their decisions. Mm-hmm. Right? So this is a process ultimately of, we're writing a book while we're helping someone to also create more whole-ness in their experience of life.
Wow.
A more powerful human being in the work that they do.
So you're like an author therapist.
We say shepherd. Like I try to be very careful with that because
I know there's liability, right?
We're not trained healers. We are working on how does the past show up in your present, more so than trying to go back and fix anything, heal anything, right? Because we actually come from a standpoint where there's nothing that was broken or that needs to be fixed, right? I have some in-depth Gestalt training that I am so grateful for.
That's also that's a coaching approach too.
So, right. So how are we supporting someone in feeling better about their journey, having more confidence to put it out into the world, having right? Vulnerability is a tricky thing, and that our mind leads us to believe that people will dislike us when we say things that are vulnerable. And when we actually put it into practice, that does occur. In my experience, it's about 10% of the time.
Right.
In our minds, it's the flip-flop, right?
Oh, yeah.
90% of people will hate me, or et cetera. And so we have to create spaces where people can practice that and come to learn, not through us telling them, but through their own experience,
right? That,
oh, this is a strength. And I've positioned it as a weakness in my head. And once they own it as a strength, they're ready to take that book out into the world and do some real beautiful work with it.
So when they come to you, have they already written the book?
All over the map. We attract people who've spent money elsewhere and ended up really, unfortunately, unhappy with where they got. People who are just coming in the ideation stage. We attract people who really want to write their own book, but want someone in the trenches with them, all the way to people who are like, I will never touch a key on the keyboard. I want to talk this out. I want people to listen. And we use it because I came from LA, where you don't do anything alone. We don't often use the traditional one-on-one ghostwriter kind of a methodology. We use a team approach to creativity. My favorite is when we're able to partner a writer who specializes in journalism and a writer who specializes in fiction, because there's the words that we use with each other, but there's all this other data that's coming off. My intonation, where do I pause? Where do I take that big gulp? Where am I taking that huge breath because something just happened to me?
Yeah.
We got to capture all of that true essence of a person, which is way more impactful than just the language, which is what a lot of books end up becoming, just a reflection of the language we use.
Wow. And then do you also work with people around the publishing and then moving on beyond that in terms of how they put it out into the world and all of that?
We do. Our goal is really to help be a single point of contact for as much of what an author needs as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because even in my experience as a CEO of a growing company, when we get burdened with logistical things, the visionary has less time to be out front, exploring, impacting, learning how to be more impactful as an organization. And so the author can spend 90% of their time managing relationships, with all kinds of different people. And so we try to ease that burden. So we have publishing options for people. It's not a requirement because there are many publishing options, but we have our own publishing option. We've partnered with Conscious Capitalism and have an imprint that we work on with them. And then there's book launch, and then there's all the other things, that support. There's so many books that come out. How do we help make mental space for the world? That's a huge other task of the platform.
Right.
And how are we creating a certain kind of sex appeal, so to speak, that emotionally, magnetically pulls people to the brand?
Wow. I love the way you're talking about this. And I can see the acting training and the way that you have to source something within yourself and within your authors, that brings that to life, and how you can help somebody bring that out in their writing, in their story, in their message. And thinking about this author you just talked about, whose book, if gang members are seen carrying his book, they get demerits. I love it. That has just got to make you feel like you are definitely on purpose.
It's remarkable. And at the same time, we were a young company when we put that out. There were a lot of things we didn't know how to do for that author. So there was so much to be proud of. And there was so much heartache over all the lessons we had to learn together and slog through, such as schools don't have money for books.
Right.
So we had to find businesses who were willing to buy 1,000 books and deliver them into a school system, and all these. There was so much to learn. He started a nonprofit that I helped him to get up and running. Like, there were so many different things, and that breadth of understanding of what does it truly take to create a platform that people will pay attention to.
Yeah.
Right. It needs so much. It needs to be steeped in authenticity, but it also needs to be expressed artistically so that people have that emotional access point, in the same way that a company like Mountain Dew is using me to create an emotional access point. Right.
Yeah.
That's what art offers us an opportunity to do. And not too many people in business, I think, have access to that or approach things that way. Advertising companies, sometimes are successful at that, but they're not always. They haven't been trained, typically, advertisers, to root it in authenticity.
Yeah.
So it's simply cleverness, right? Which becomes that manipulation that I was doing when I was a younger kid.
Right.
So I think it's a very tricky subject, but when businesses can do it well, it is magnetic.
Well, and I think it also taps into a longer game. You can attract somebody in the moment and they buy the bottle off the shelf, but how do you keep them coming back and wanting to develop a deeper taste for something or develop it further? And for a bottle of soda, I don't know. I guess there is brand loyalty and all that, but I think about what you're talking about with vulnerability. One thing I've been noticing a lot of lately is that when people do show up authentic and vulnerable, their leadership shows up in a way that I haven't seen before. There's a real tie-in between people want to follow that.
They do, in my experience also. Certainly in my own journey, I have to recognize that the more vulnerable I've been able to become, the more I've been able to and understand that part of myself and lose judgment for that part of myself, the more I'm able to lose judgment that I have for other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's very imperfect science because we're human beings, but the more that I do that work, the more I attract other people who have been interested in that work. And we build teams that can go greater distances and deeper together because of what we're attracting. So I think a leader's personal capacity is a reflection of the organization that they're building, and their individual limitations are their organizational limitations.
Mm-hmm. And when they don't show up that way, I think that's when they lose people.
Yes, when I have, in my past, I have certainly had plenty of times in my journey where, like I said, did a lot of things well, and then, I didn't understand my triggers or how to manage myself, and was unkind to people that worked for me. And those moments either required a tremendous amount of cleanup, or they caused, they were poles pinned on grenades that couldn't be salvaged.
Ooh, what a metaphor.
I've been part of too many emotional grenades.
I was going to say,
really worked hard to.
That was dramatic, Corey.
Well, believe me, for me, it was authentic too.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you work with authors, but you do other work as well. Don't you work with organizations as well?
We do. So we took that process that we used for books, and our process is not inexpensive, particularly if someone is really leveraging our team and not doing the writing themselves. And we started asking questions about how can we potentially utilize that process to benefit people in different ways. I started going out to, I was head down in the business for 7-8 years. 2014, I got invited to the Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit, room full of, at that time, 250 CEOs and presidents running companies 5 million and up. And had that moment of getting in there going, what am I doing here? And by the end of that 2.5-day conference, I felt like I knew exactly why I was there. I had a very strong compulsion to serve that community of people, because these are a lot of people who've invested a tremendous amount in their intellectual capacity. It's why they're successful. And they love this consciousness concept, but it's not necessarily intuitive. And that's the world that I came from. I didn't have the business degree, or I came from the other end of that.
Right.
So one of the first questions that I asked and went back to my team with was this feeling like, in a conference space, this recognition of people don't seem to get comfortable until it's time to leave. And if we're not comfortable, we're not taking risks. So there's a lot, for me, it was a lot of lost opportunities. So I said, we're really good at creating equalizing humanity-based experiences. How can we expedite potentially this ability for people to stop the chatter of how am I different, or who's ahead of me, or who am I ahead of, all that hierarchy stuff? How can we quiet the mind and get into we are all the same? And that's when we created the Vulnerability Wall art installation. And that took off, and it started to fill that need, and then became a way to market our company at events. And then we started getting hired to do them. And we've now done them for Microsoft and ADP and Marketo, like lots of big companies. I think we're about to do 2 for Disney, like crazy, like beautiful stuff. And it's all human and emotional. It's based in the communities. It's crowdsourced from the community. What are people feeling vulnerable about? Or there might be a different question. People are contributing anonymously, and our artists take their submissions and turn them into art on the wall. So if you've submitted something that's particularly vulnerable, right, there's the act of getting it off your back, so to speak, putting it on a card and walking away, and there's a release in that. But then to come back and see this thing that you have traditionally negative emotion around, maybe even feel like it's an ugly piece of you, or a shame-filled piece, or a guilt-ridden piece, to see it reflected back as a piece of beauty offers this colliding moment of, oh wow, there's 2 different stories available to me. Which one do I want to carry forward with? So I think it's a very personal opportunity to release something that's maybe been driving us in unconscious ways. And then there's the realization of, oh, there's 100 different pieces of art on this big, beautiful 8-foot tall, 16-foot wide wall. Every one of them is a reflection of something. So this is a statement of who are we?
Yeah.
So that process unfolded, and then we took it further and said, that's still inexpensive. We fly artists around the country. It's a big, wall with construct, et cetera. So they're not cheap either. But so then we said, what's a really low cost item that we could create to offer that experience to people, and that's when we created the game.
I think I have to get a look at that game.
It's awesome. So then we got back into film documentaries. As we talked about before, we've done we push creative boundaries in terms of amplification. So we've done best-selling business books turned into graphic novels, which was a blast with folks like Marshall Goldsmith and Robert Cialdini and Tony Shea, the CEO of Zappos. And we still do a few of those a year. We're actually in the process of licensing one that we're super excited about right now. And then we do organizational work at this point. We started as a book company, but at this point, the continual evolution has become, we actually solve really complex business challenges through storytelling.
I love it.
Right. So we go into bigger organizations now. We might do culture work. We might support brand amplification through really zeroing in on that human component and then finding a creative way to invite people into it. Mm-hmm. We're doing a 10-episode podcast series for a new wine that's coming out with a fabulous fictionalized story that's rooted in the core values of the people who work at the company. Like, it's just so fun. We're having a blast.
I am loving what you're up to. And I love the evolution of how you took in your 20s, you recognized that what you were doing, as exciting as it sounded, it wasn't enough for you. And you transformed it, even though it was a struggle. And look where you are today. I mean, I can only imagine all the little black and blue marks all over your arms from pinching yourself.
I feel very blessed.
And I feel blessed to have a chance to talk to you today. I'm really, really excited about what you're up to. And
thank you. If I may, can I offer real quick that?
Yes, you say whatever you want.
This is something that organizations bring me in to support them in doing, and then I do it as part of a workshop or a keynote. But if people go to roundtablecompanies.com/purpose,
yes,
there's a guided exercise to help people understand what it is that they stand for.
Oh, right? I love
that thing that I was searching for so long. Once you find it, so much else clicks into place. So I'm really proud of it. I think it's highly effective. I've watched it blow people's minds open.
Excellent.
So they can go to roundtablecompanies.com/purpose.
We will have that in the show notes, definitely. Anything else that you want people to know about that we can put in the show notes that they can click on?
I mean, certainly if this is intriguing and this conversation is intriguing, they can check out our website, roundtablecompanies.com.
Yes.
See the different ways that you can storytell around your brand.
Yeah.
We offer, there are downloads all over our website that are free for people to help them in their journey, whether it's related to a book or trying to find their purpose, or 6 questions around how are you ineffectively marketing, like all story lens stuff. So if this is interesting to people, they can poke around and find a bunch more assets.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, I'm just so grateful to have this time with you. And you really do epitomize what this podcast is all about, work from the inside out. And I'm just thrilled to have had you today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I know I'm going to be following very closely to see what you're up to.
I appreciate that. You're very kind.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Corey Blake. It was so much fun to speak with him and learn about his creative background and how he has navigated his professional path to where he is today. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? Is there something you'll put into action that you'll benefit from for years to come? Share what resonated with you in the show notes at workfromtheinsideout.com. Look for episode 043. That's also where you'll find all the links and resources from today's podcast. If you enjoyed this episode with Corey, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find my page at tammygoularloeb.com/Apple. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. And who knows, maybe you'll be my next interview on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.